Hey man, let me tell you something that's gonna sting, but if you're honest with yourself, it might be the most important thing you hear this year. There's a moment in every relationship, a moment most men never see, when the power shifts. One day, you're the man she's trying to impress, the mystery, the challenge, the energy she can't stop thinking about, and then something happens. Maybe you texted a little too fast, maybe you rearranged your schedule one too many times, maybe you started asking, "Is everything okay?" when she went quiet, and just like that, without warning, without announcement, you became the man chasing her approval instead of the man she was chasing. You didn't notice the shift, but she felt it, and the moment she felt it, something changed in how she sees you, something you can't undo with words. Something you can't fix with effort, something that will poison everything that comes after unless you understand what happened. Here's the brutal truth most men never learn. Women don't fall in love with men who need their validation. They fall in love with men whose sense of worth is so solid, so unshakable, that her opinion, good or bad, doesn't move the needle. But when you start performing for her approval, when her mood becomes the thing that determines your mood, when her silence sends you into a spiral of overthinking and overtexting, you've handed her something she never asked for, something that kills her attraction faster than any mistake you could make. You've handed her control over your emotional state, and that's the beginning of the end. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how this happens. How she, often without even meaning to, pulls you into the weaker position. How you end up chasing validation you shouldn't need from a woman who used to chase yours. And most importantly, how to reverse it. Let's get into it. The trap doesn't start with anything dramatic. It starts small. So small you don't even notice. Maybe in the beginning you were busy. You had your life, your purpose, your momentum. You responded when you had time. You made plans when it worked for you. You were interested, but you weren't desperate. And she felt that. She felt that your world wasn't revolving around her, that you had things going on that mattered, that your attention was something she had to earn, not something she was automatically entitled to. That's what attracted her in the first place. But then something shifted. Maybe she started pulling back a little. Maybe the texts got shorter. Maybe the energy dipped. And instead of staying in your center, you leaned in. You started initiating more, texting faster, trying to figure out what changed. And that's the moment, right there, when the power transferred. Because here's what most men don't understand about female psychology. Women are constantly, unconsciously evaluating your emotional stability, not through what you say, through how you respond to shifts in her energy. When she pulls back and you chase harder, you're communicating something loud and clear. Your approval matters more to me than my own peace of mind. And that message, it's an attraction killer. Not because she's cruel, not because she's playing games on purpose, but because deep in her psychology, she's wired to feel attracted to strength, to stability, to a man whose sense of self doesn't crumble the moment she changes her tone. When you chase her validation, you're telling her you're not that man. And once she believes that, everything changes. She stops seeing you as the prize. She starts seeing you as the one who needs her more than she needs you. And from that position, attraction doesn't just fade, it dies. Now here's where it gets psychological, because she doesn't just wait for you to fall into this trap, her instincts actively test for it. What I'm about to explain is the testing mechanism most men never see coming, and why every time you react, you're proving exactly what she's looking for. Let me explain something about women that will change how you see every interaction. Women test, constantly, unconsciously, relentlessly. They're not doing it to be cruel. They're doing it because their survival instincts are wired to seek one thing above all else in a man: emotional stability under pressure. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. A woman is vulnerable. Her body is designed to carry children, to nurture, to need protection during that time. So her psychology evolved to constantly scan for strength in potential partners. But she can't just ask you, "Are you strong?" because any man can say yes. So she tests. She goes quiet to see if you'll chase. She creates ambiguity to see if you'll seek clarity. She pulls back to see if you'll lean in. She gives mixed signals to see if you'll scramble to figure her out. Every single one of these is a test, and every time you react, every time you chase, explain, over-communicate, or seek reassurance, you fail. Not because you did something wrong, but because your reaction told her that your emotional state is dependent on her behavior, and that's the opposite of what she's looking for. The man who passes these tests is the man who doesn't flinch. He notices her pulling back and doesn't immediately try to close the gap. He sees her mixed signals and stays centered instead of scrambling. He experiences her silence and doesn't fill it with desperate communication. That man communicates something powerful without saying a word. My peace doesn't depend on you. My sense of self isn't up for negotiation. I'm here because I want to be, not because I need your approval to feel complete. That's the energy that makes her chase. That's the energy that keeps her attracted, but most men never develop it. They get a little attention and immediately start protecting it, chasing it, performing for more of it, and that's exactly how she ends up with all the power. Let me get specific, because I want you to recognize yourself in this. Think about the last time things started to shift with a woman. Maybe it started when she used to double text you and then suddenly she didn't. Maybe she used to initiate plans, but now you're always the one asking. Maybe she used to send voice notes, paragraphs, energy, and now you're lucky to get a few words. What did you do when you noticed that shift? Be honest. You probably started performing. You sent a meme hoping to make her laugh. You referenced an inside joke hoping to spark something. You asked about her day, her week, her life, not because you genuinely wanted to know, but because you needed a response to feel okay. Maybe you started double texting when she didn't reply fast enough. Maybe you started overthinking her word choices. Maybe you read into every emoji, every punctuation mark, every lag in response time. You told yourself you were being attentive, caring, showing her you're different, but here's what was really happening. You were chasing validation. Every message, every gesture, every effort was a request for reassurance disguised as interest. And she felt it. She felt the shift from this man is living his life and including me in it to this man is organizing his life around getting a response from me. And that shift changed how she saw you, not because she analyzed it consciously, not because she thought he's being needy, but because something in her gut told her you were no longer the man she was initially attracted to. You went from being the man she couldn't quite figure out to the man she could predict with her eyes closed. And predictability, that's the death of attraction. When she knows exactly how you'll respond to her silence, her distance, her mood, there's no tension left. No mystery, no challenge. You've become a vending machine. She puts in a quarter of attention and knows exactly what's going to come out, and nobody falls in love with a vending machine. Now here's where it gets darker, because this doesn't just affect how she sees you, it starts to affect how you see yourself. The trap I'm about to describe is how chasing her validation slowly erodes your masculine identity and turns you into someone you don't even recognize. Here's what nobody warns you about. This validation trap doesn't just weaken your position with her, it starts to rewire who you are. Think about what happens when your sense of worth becomes tied to her responses. Her text comes quick, you feel good. She takes hours, you feel anxious. She's affectionate, you're confident. She's distant, you're questioning everything. She compliments you, your whole day improves. She goes cold, you can't focus on anything else. You've made her the thermometer of your emotional state, and that thermometer is now controlling your entire life. You wake up and the first thing you check is whether she's responded. You go through your day with one eye on your phone, one ear listening for the notification. You start editing yourself, filtering what you say, thinking about how she'll perceive every message before you send it. Will this seem too eager? Is this funny enough? Should I wait longer before responding? You're not being yourself anymore. You're performing a version of yourself that you think she'll approve of. And here's the tragedy. That performance is exactly what's killing her attraction. Because women don't fall for performances. They fall for authenticity, for groundedness, for a man who is so secure in who he is that he doesn't need to calculate every move. But you can't be that man when her approval has become your compass. You've gone from building your life to managing her perception of you. You've gone from being a man with a mission to being a man with an obsession. And the deeper you go into this trap, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before she entered the picture. Brother, let me tell you something directly. You weren't made to chase validation, not from her, not from anyone. You were made to build, to create, to conquer, to stand in your purpose with such clarity that the right woman would be lucky to stand beside you. But somewhere along the way, you traded that mission for monitoring her inbox, and that trade is costing you everything. So here's the question: what does she actually want? Because if all your effort is pushing her away, what's the opposite? What's the energy that makes her chase instead of retreat? What I'm about to explain will flip everything you think you know about attraction. Let me tell you something that took me years to understand. What women say they want and what they actually respond to are often completely different things. She'll tell you she wants a man who communicates, a man who's open, a man who shows his feelings, and on some level that's true. But here's what she really responds to: emotional stability. Not a man who shares his feelings because he's desperate for connection. A man who shares his feelings because he's secure enough to be vulnerable without needing her to fix him. There's a massive difference. The man who over-communicates, who texts constantly, who explains himself endlessly, he's not being open, he's being needy. He's outsourcing his emotional regulation to her. But the man who's comfortable with silence, who doesn't need constant contact to feel secure, who can go hours or days without reaching out because his life is full without her, that man is magnetic. Not because he's playing games, because he's genuinely complete. He has purpose that drives him, discipline that structures him, peace that grounds him. His emotional state isn't a kite blowing in the wind of her responses. It's an anchor sunk deep into his own foundation. And when she senses that, when she realizes that her silence doesn't shake him, that her distance doesn't break him, that her moods don't move him, something shifts in her psychology. She stops feeling like she has power over him, and that's when she starts chasing. Not because she's confused, not because she's playing games, because she's finally found what every woman is looking for: a man whose sense of self is not for sale. A man whose attention is valuable because it's not freely given. A man whose presence in her life is a choice, not a need. That's what she actually wants. Not your constant attention, your centered presence, not your availability, your selectivity, not your willingness to chase, your willingness to walk away. Now let me show you exactly how to get there. If you're already in the trap, if you've already felt the power shift, this next section is your roadmap back. Here's how you reverse the dynamic and reclaim your position so you recognize yourself in everything I've said. You felt the shift. You know you're in the weaker position. The question is, can you reverse it? Yes, but not the way you think. Your instinct right now is probably to do something, to have a conversation, to explain that you've been acting different and you want to reset. Don't. That's just more validation seeking wearing a different costume. The reversal doesn't happen through words, it happens through energy, and energy shifts through action. Here's what you do. First, you stop reacting. I mean, completely. No more analyzing her texts. No more reading into her responses. No more adjusting your behavior based on what you think she wants to see. When she messages, you respond when you have time, not when you're desperate to maintain connection, when you have time. When she goes quiet, you go about your life. You don't fill the silence with attempts to reconnect. You let the silence exist without needing to fix it. This alone will feel uncomfortable because you've trained yourself to react. Your nervous system is wired to treat her distance as an emergency. It's not an emergency, it's a test, and you pass it by, not reacting. Second, you reconnect with your purpose. What were you building before she entered your life? What were you focused on? What gave you energy, direction, meaning? Go back to that, not as a strategy to get her back, as a return to who you actually are: the gym, the business, the craft, the brotherhood, whatever it was that made you feel alive before you started organizing your life around her responses. Pick it back up, not because it will make her chase you, because it will make you stop needing her to. Third, you embrace the discomfort. When you stop chasing, things will feel wrong. Your brain will tell you that you're losing her, that you're making a mistake, that you need to do something. That feeling is withdrawal. You've been addicted to the validation loop, the little hits of dopamine you got when she responded positively. Now you're cutting off the supply. It's supposed to feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is the feeling of your dependence dying. Sit with it. Don't act on it. Let it pass. And here's what happens on her end. She notices, she feels the shift in your energy. You're no longer leaning in, you're no longer available at her convenience, you're no longer predictable. And suddenly the man she thought she had figured out becomes a mystery again. She starts wondering why you're not chasing, why you're not texting, why you're not reacting to her shifts the way you used to. That uncertainty, that's attraction reigniting. Not because you played a game, because you returned to your center. And from your center, you're no longer controllable. That's the reversal. Now let me show you how to make this permanent, because reversing the dynamic once isn't enough. You need to become the kind of man who never falls into this trap again. This next section is about identity transformation, not just tactical fixes. There's a fundamental shift that needs to happen, and it's deeper than behavior. You need to stop seeing yourself as someone who's trying to win her approval and start seeing yourself as the prize she's trying to win. Not arrogantly, not with ego, but with grounded certainty in your own value. Here's what I mean. Most men enter dating with a question. Does she like me? They spend all their energy trying to answer that question. They analyze her behavior, read into her signals, to adjust their approach based on what they think she wants. But that question itself puts them in the weaker position. The man who attracts, the man who has power in the dynamic, asks a different question. Is she worthy of my investment? He's not wondering if he measures up to her. He's evaluating whether she measures up to him. Not with arrogance, with standards. He has a life, he has a purpose, he has peace, and the woman who wants to be part of that life needs to demonstrate that she deserves access to it. That's being the prize. It's not about being cold or withholding. It's about not giving yourself away before someone has proven they'll value what they receive. When you operate from this frame, everything changes. You're not texting to keep the connection alive. You're texting because you have something to say. You're not available whenever she wants. You're available when it works for your life. You're not adjusting your plans around her. You're inviting her into plans that already exist. And she feels this. Every woman can feel the difference between a man who's trying to earn her and a man who knows his worth. The man who's trying to earn her triggers suspicion. Why is he working so hard? What's wrong with him? The man who knows his worth triggers desire. What makes him so confident? What does he have going on? Become that man, not through tactics, through genuine transformation of how you see yourself. Build a life so full that her presence is a bonus, not a necessity. Develop purpose so clear that your day has direction with or without her. Create peace so deep that her moods don't disturb your center. When you become that man, you don't have to try to reverse the power dynamic. You become the power. Let me leave you with the principles that will keep you from ever falling into this trap again. These aren't tricks or tactics. They're the operating system of a man who never chases validation. This is how you make the transformation permanent. Here's how you operate moving forward. Rule 1. Your validation comes from within. Stop measuring your worth by her responses. Start measuring it by whether you lived according to your values today. Did you build something? Did you move toward your goals? Did you maintain your discipline? Did you show up as the man you respect? That's your scorecard. Not her texts, not her attention, not her mood toward you. When your validation is internal, her behavior becomes information rather than identity. You can observe how she acts without your sense of self riding on it. Rule 2. Attention is sacred, not free. Your time, your energy, your emotional focus, these are valuable. Stop distributing them like they're infinite. When you treat your attention as something precious, it becomes precious to others. When you give it away constantly, it loses all value. She should feel like your attention is something she needs to earn and maintain, not through games, through the natural scarcity that comes from a man who has more going on than just her. Rule 3. Never explain, never complain. When you feel the urge to explain yourself, to defend your actions, to justify your choices, pause. That urge is coming from a place of seeking approval. You want her to understand, so she'll accept you. But explanations rarely create acceptance. They create the perception that you're unsure of yourself. The man who explains himself too much looks like a man on trial. The man who states his truth and moves on looks like a man in control. Stop explaining, start embodying. Rule 4, stillness beats scrambling. When she creates chaos, when she tests, provokes, withdraws, gives mixed signals, your instinct will be to respond, to fix, to chase, to close the gap, resist. Stillness in the face of chaos communicates strength. It tells her that her emotional weather doesn't determine your emotional state. That's what she's looking for. Not a man who scrambles to meet her where she is. A man who remains steady so she can meet him where he is. Let her chaos crash against your stillness. And watch how quickly she calms. Rule 5. Comfort with loss. The ultimate source of power in any dynamic is the willingness to lose it. If you can't walk away, you can't negotiate. If you can't let her go, you can't hold your ground. If the thought of losing her terrifies you, that terror will leak into everything you do. But when you're genuinely comfortable with the possibility of loss, when you know that your life goes on either way, you become untouchable. Not cold, not indifferent, untouchable. She can feel the difference between a man who's clutching and a man who's choosing. The man who's clutching triggers pity at best. The man who's choosing triggers desire. Be the man who's choosing, always. Let me leave you with this. The trap I've described today isn't something women do maliciously. It's not a conspiracy. It's not cruelty. It's testing. It's her psychology seeking what it's designed to seek. Strength, stability, a man whose foundation doesn't crack under pressure. The problem was never her. The problem was how you responded. When you chased her validation, you communicated weakness. When you performed for her approval, you became predictable. When you let her moods control your emotional state, you handed her power she never should have had. But that ends today. Not because you're going to play games, not because you're going to manipulate or strategize, because you're going to become a different man. A man whose sense of worth isn't up for negotiation. A man whose attention is earned, not expected. A man whose peace is the priority, not the sacrifice. When you become that man, you won't have to worry about losing the power position. You'll be the power position. She'll feel it in how you move, how you speak, how you hold silence without needing to fill it. And instead of you chasing her validation, she'll start chasing yours. Not because you tricked her, because you finally became the man she was looking for all along. The man who doesn't need her approval to feel complete. The man who's already complete and choosing to include her. That's the difference. So the next time you feel the urge to double text, to over-explain, to chase, to perform, pause, return to your center, let her come to you. That's how you escape the trap. That's how you reclaim your power, and that's how you become unforgettable.